This is not beanbag.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
It is Friday, May 10th, 2019. I'm Michael Brooks on a Casual Friday, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA, on today's Casual Friday. Bhaskar Sunkara, founder of the Jackman magazine, author of The Socialist Manifesto, the case for radical politics in an era of extreme inequality. We're talking socialist history, the path to dealing with extreme inequality, democratizing the economy, and the global climate ecological crisis. Plus, pretty good Twitter ad that Bhaskar cut for the Sanders campaign. Then the great David Feldman, host of the David Feldman Show, is here to give us a movie recommendation, argue over a recurring guest with me, and talk a little bit about the lawlessness of the Trump administration and the fecklessness of Democratic leadership. Donald Trump, as Juan Cole said, Donald Trump speaking is like the experiment with the monkey tapping randomly on the keyboard. Will it occasionally produce a work of Shakespeare? Well, some of the random spouting out of Trump's mouth has appeared to be offering Iran the same deal that Obama painstakingly achieved with them, with the negotiating partners. Even as right, I'm the only one that matters. Even as Pompeo continues to push for a global catastrophe with Iran. Iran lifts caps on uranium enrichment. Bernie Sanders' campaign staff has just signed a historic union contract. Bernie Sanders and AOC, not only are they proposing get tough rules on the predatory lending industry, the bill would include postal banking, while the Trump administration wants to allow debt collectors to harass people even more. Venezuelan lawmakers seek refuge in embassies after a crackdown, while Juan Guaido is like, I would be all right with, like, U.S. military intervention. Like, maybe this is not endogenous. Maybe we're going to need some more help, guys.
Oh, we're up to 1,000 on the stream. That's awesome. This crew's going well.
1,000 on the stream. Oh, that's really great. Still could use some help. Farmers...
Get into the super chat.
There's plenty of general level Patreon members open.
Yeah. Appreciate all the support. Gonna need a lot more to go before we get to that.
Question from the super chat on my interim status as presidency. We're gonna skip that one. But thanks for the question.
Those guys don't even really matter. Farmers are losing their patience with Donald Trump and his China trade war. And students walk out of the Colorado school shooting visual saying that their trauma is being politicized. And a San Francisco billionaire is wasting an extraordinary amount of money to solve a persistent but highly achievable problem to solve, which is getting rid of homelessness. He should just be dumping money into the Sanders campaign and other initiatives to jack his taxes up. Association of Jurists calls Lula da Silva a political prisoner. and the ANC looks set to return to power without need of a coalition in South Africa. All that and much, much more on today's Majority Report. So, as we've been highlighting the last couple of days, things are getting extraordinarily dangerous with regards to Iran. It's very important to emphasize, this is immediate history, that the Joint Plan of Action Agreement was working. There was no objective source, and no even, by the way, one would presume highly biased source that questioned its efficacy. The Trump administration signed off on the deal early on. That trigger, by the way, that the Secretary of State, that the State Department had to re-sign the deal, I believe recertify it every 6 months, that's not part of the international agreement. That was a side poison pill inserted by Congress to beat Obama over the head for recertifying it, and presumably, I think what actually most Republicans also assumed would be a Democratic, a Hillary Clinton presidency. The Iranians have stepped out of the agreement to some extent, which, frankly, it makes a lot of sense. Why would they maintain an agreement? Their economy is being strangled. They've lived up to every end of the bargain. And the United States is dangerous, belligerent, dishonest, and bullying the Chinese and the Europeans. This is Mike Pompeo continuing on that path. I mean, listen to just... It's, you have to know the imperial hubris and the profound arrogance of this. This is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Pause it. I can't hear it, guys. Okay.
What we've been trying to do is to get Iran to behave like a normal nation. We laid out 12 elements of that. Every single one of those elements is consistent with what we ask every other country in the world to do. So these are not Iran-specific, things like not conducting assassination campaigns around the world, not sponsoring terror organizations that inflict missile attacks on Israel, now 600 plus, not building missile systems in Yemen. I mean, these are things we ask every country to do. That's our objective. That's been our goal from the beginning. I've been working on this since I was a member of Congress. Our objective is to get the Islamic Republic of Iran to behave like a normal nation. When they do that, we will welcome them back.
So, and I have no doubt, yes, Mike Pompeo has been already a profoundly pernicious influence in foreign policy going back to his time in the House. But look, he mentions Yemen. The United States has partnered with Saudi Arabia in a campaign that murders and savages civilians on a daily basis in Yemen. The Houthi rebels were, in fact, not clients of Iran, and the relationship between them and the Iranian state has actually been significantly increased post Saudi U.S. supported mass murder campaign beginning in 2015. And look, Israel certainly conducts assassination campaigns. Israel conducts collective punishment. The Saudis have an enormous amount of blood on their hands in Syria and Yemen, and of course have certainly funded and emanated terrorist groups. Again, does Iran engage in some of these behaviors? Undoubtedly. Does the United States engage in a lot of these behaviors? Undoubtedly. And obviously the Saudis and the Israelis. The point was that this agreement solved a very specific goal on proliferation and opened the door to potentially solving other problems. And that's why the world is in a much less safe place. But that's the plan and the agenda of people like Pompeo. They're dangerous extremists. Now, Donald Trump, again, I don't know how much we can buy into this, obviously, because the truth of the matter is that he doesn't have much. He doesn't think about these things. He has random impulses. His main trigger point with Iran was that Obama had a great foreign policy achievement, so he was aggrieved and needed to ruin it. But I think, even as this kind of never-ending push for regime change, for a coup in Venezuela continues to fail, I think that Trump seems to have some allergy, or maybe even as he gets back on the trail, some sense that part of his broader scheme was a kind of Buchananite message on non-intervention. So in this clip, first he's going to lie about John Kerry, and if anything, my sense is that John Kerry has been out of office publicly trying to preserve a successful deal that made the world better that he helped negotiate. But Trump is, going to lie about him and threaten him with the Logan Act, which is very in keeping with the authoritarian nature of this regime. And then on the other hand, it looks like Donald Trump all of a sudden, and again, this maybe was maybe if the Iranians, as soon as Trump got into office, were like, hey, would you like to open some hotels here? And we have a new idea, my friend. The joint plan of action is called the Great Trump Peace Agreement. This problem's all might have been solved. Trump probably would have agreed to that within a matter of days. But here he is, basically begging the president of Iran to call him and offering the Obama deal. And if, North Korea is any indication, obviously, it would end up being an even more generous deal from an Iranian point of view. But here's Donald Trump.
What I'd like to see with Iran, I'd like to see them call me. John Kerry speaks to them a lot. John Kerry tells them not to call. That's a violation of the Logan Act. And frankly, he should be prosecuted on that. But my people don't want to do anything that's... Only the Democrats do that kind of stuff.
Historically, the Republicans did this, specifically Richard Nixon to the LBJ administration as they were trying to end the Vietnam
Right. Wasn't that the one that Kissinger was like a double agent at the
Yeah.
Paris Peace Accords, specifically to prolong the Vietnam War to help Richard Nixon's electoral
he jumped from
prospects?
Rockefeller to Nixon using his connections with the Dragon Lady of Vietnam. I forget what
Oh,
her name
no,
is.
of Taiwan.
Of Taiwan,
Shanghai
yeah.
Shek's wife.
Oh,
Madame
right.
Shanghai Shek, yes. Major figure in right-wing politics. And, of course, there's a lot of interesting reporting on how long the hostages may have stayed there, potentially in additional days, when Ronald Reagan was running to deregulate Wall Street.
Only the Democrats do this stuff.
But I don't play tough like the Democrats.
Don't want to do anything that's... Only the Democrats do that kind of stuff.
Right.
If it were the opposite way, they'd prosecute him under the Logan Act. But John Kerry violated the Logan Act. He's talking to Iran and has many meetings and many phone calls, and he's telling them what to do. That is a total violation of the Logan Act.
Okay, of course, Don Kerry released a statement saying that Donald Trump is wrong in every regard, essentially, and I think we can, of course, safely assume that he is. And good. And by the way, if John Kerry is informally, and I'm sure with lawyer consultations within the letter of the law, having back channels to the Iranians, and I think it was reported a couple years ago that he might have met some people in Paris who had connections to the Islamic Republic and basically was saying, like, hold tight, this lunatic won't be president forever. Good. That's the most productive use of John Kerry's time. Thank you, John Kerry. Quote, and he said, I just want to say, just briefly from The Guardian, the Trump administration had previously insisted that Iran would have to fulfill a list of 12, this is the Pompeo thing, 12 wide-ranging conditions, including non-intervention in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq in order for sanctions to be lifted. Trump's remarks suggested that a new deal on the nuclear program would be enough. And Iran's ambassador to the UN said once again, this is the ambassador, the first question he has to answer is why he left the negotiating table, because we were talking to all participants of the nuclear deal, including the U.S. So all of a sudden he decided to leave the negotiating table. What is the guarantee that he will not renege again on the future talks between Iran and the U.S.? And this is Kerry's statement. Everything President Trump today said is simply wrong. End of story. He's wrong about the facts, wrong about the law, and soundly he's been wrong about how to use diplomacy to keep America safe.
I'm right about the Logan Act. I'm a constitutional scholar. And the Logan Act is when a country likes another prominent American leader more than they like our president.
It was named after a great man named Logan.
Who was a very loyal
He was
guy.
very loyal. And then Logan would have razor blades come out of his knuckles when he got mad. Is that right? What is it?
Oh, is that an X-Men
Thinking of
reference?
X-Men. I'm
I'm
trying to
the
think
wrong
of
guy.
Yeah.
to-
Okay.
Wolverine.
Wolverine, very loyal guy.
Or is Logan the one
Tough
with the
guy.
laser eyes? I don't know. I can't remember.
She had laser eyes because we don't control our borders anymore.
How many meetings are you having? Why am I not invited to these meetings? I do
Maybe-
good meetings.
Does anybody think that maybe I'd like to meet Persian academics in Paris?
You guys can use a Trump
Yeah.
hotel property.
Yeah,
for
why can't we
meetings.
use a Trump hotel property? No one ever thinks. There's a phrase called wet our beaks.
Just feel a little bit left out.
Feel a little bit left out. And then he looked around and he said, the Don will get paid for this. After all, we are not communists. But that's what AOC wants. That's what Crazy Bernie wants. The Majority Report is supported in part by Simple Habit. Simple Habit is the mobile app that provides a massive and diverse library of 4 to 5 minute guided meditations. And the Majority Report audience can try Simple Habit totally free for an entire week when you go to simplehabit.com/majority. As I say, there's a growing body of scientific evidence on meditation's efficacy for everything from pain relief to depression and anxiety, particularly Richie Davidson's work in neuroimaging at the University of Wisconsin, but going back to Herbert Benson's work at the relaxation response at Harvard. Simple Habit has over 2,000 guided meditations specifically designed for different parts of your day and just about anything you might be dealing with in life. They have guided meditations for mindfulness, meditations for anxiety, for depression, and for when you're having trouble falling asleep. Meditations for when you're wanting to overcome procrastination, or when you're having something important going on at work. Meditations designed for parents. They have meditations made specifically for when you're waking up or on a lunch break or when you've just gotten home from work or when you're going to bed. I personally love the ease of the app, the range of options, the idea that I can try. Actually, just the other day, I tried the lunchtime. I went into the other room. I tried the lunchtime meditation right before, as I was about to get back on mic, and it was excellent. Different people are trying to accomplish different things with meditation, and Simple Habit is able to cater to just about anyone, regardless of what their goals with meditation are or how much experience they have. The variety of guided meditations on Simple Habit is what sets it apart. Simple Habit just won the 2018 Google Play Award for Best Wellbeing App. It's available on iOS, Android, and web browser. And the Majority Report audience can try it for free for a week by going to simplehabit.com/majority. If you're watching on YouTube, we've put a link in the video description. We'll be right back with Bhaskar Sunkara on the Majority Report. Welcome back to the Majority Report. Michael Brooks here, joining us now from the road, where he's promoting his excellent new book, is Bhaskar Sankara. The book is called The Socialist Manifesto, a case for radical politics in an era of extreme inequality. He's also the founder of Jackman Magazine, which is indispensable and everybody should be reading. Bhaskar, thanks so much for being here. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
It's great to be speaking with you. So, as always, let's reset here. What do you think when you now it's sort of even relative to 3-4 years ago, and I think obviously the Sanders campaign had a lot to do with this, but socialism is kind of back in the discourse to the point where even like the Republicans think they can make a lot of hay about a sort of new kind of neo fear-mongering campaign about it. But you're somebody who, first of all, explain how you discovered Marxism and socialism, and why is it that you think, in contrast to the kind of old stereotypical comment about, I don't know, I think it's attributed to Churchill, but there's some lazy, like, if you're not a socialist by the time you're 20 or something, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 25, you don't have a brain. Some kind of, hackneyed sort of like, Buckley or fake Churchill quote type of thing like that. But you make the point that you came to Marxism from, obviously ethical conviction, but a very clinical analysis of how capitalism actually works, because Marx really demystified capitalism. Why is it? Yeah, go ahead. Why is it relevant for this time so specifically, and how did you come to it?
Well, yeah, I think for me, being a Marxist is a very useful framework for understanding the world. And you can't understand everything about the world just by being a Marxist. Marxism can't explain one of my friends likes to say, Marxism can't explain the sex appeal of blue jeans. It can't explain agriculture and genetics and a whole host of other stuff that in the past the Soviet Union tried to make, Marxism explain. But what it can do is tell us a bunch of pertinent things about the world, about, the spoil of resources, how things are divided up in a given society, about the pace and nature of technological change, about why there's so much needless suffering amid abundance, and why a system can be populated by good people, not all capitalists or sociopaths, but still produce really bad outcomes. So it's a very useful framework for understanding the world. But the reason why I first got attracted to these ideas was the moral and ethical kind of, I'm a socialist because I believe that there's too much exploitation in the world. I believe there's too much needless suffering. I believe that there's too much unquestioned hierarchy in the world, and I believe that one day we'll look back upon all the divisions and all the exploitation and all the suffering in the world today amid plenty, and we'll be like, this is irrational. The same way today anyone would look back at feudalism and the divine right of kings and queens and say, wow, that was kind of irrational. You just let this crazy person with syphilis run a country as an autocratic monarch for 50 years and kill hundreds of people and thousands of people. So I think that's the separation. Marxism is the intellectual framework that you get some things from. Being a socialist is something deep in your heart. And what I want to do with this book is take people with the right moral impulses, or take people at the very least who look around in society and say things maybe could be different, and give them some of the history and the past of the various attempts to make the world a better place, and show here's where they succeeded, here's where they failed, here's why I think these ideas are still relevant going forward into the future.
So can you take us back to maybe, again, I'll give you two parts. First of all, what is Marx's idea of modes of production producing different types of societal relationships and political arrangements? You mentioned, feudalism to capitalism. Then the idea, I guess, would be, capitalism to socialism. Let's just start with that. What is that sort of trajectory he's mapping, and maybe can you explain how it's not linear or teleological? It's it's relational and dynamic, but it still does reflect some type of evolution or development or progression. And we're in maybe the middle of some very interesting times, and in terms of that model. How does that work? Where does that come from? Where does that thinking come from?
So capitalism is a unique system compared to these other systems we've had before. So we've always had class societies, at least since the Neolithic Revolution, until we created these, permanent farmer societies and we settled roots. We had kind of the division between classes. So in other words, there was a majority class that did most of the work, and there was a minority that appropriated their surplus and directed it as they saw fit. Back during feudalism, it was pretty easy to see how the system worked because you'd be the only person toiling your land, let's say as a peasant. And at the end of this harvest season, the Lord would come and say, give me 30% of your crop or you're going to die. It's pretty obvious the naked exploitation of, you're giving them something. But at the same time, you had the means of your own self-sufficiency. You had a way, you had kind of your own land to sow. You had a way to survive kind of by yourself. What capitalism is a condition in which we all become market dependent. So by that I mean there were markets before capitalism, there'll be markets after capitalism. But under capitalism, the majority class is deprived of any means to sustain themselves other than by selling their labor power, their ability to work for others, to a capitalist. And by capitalist, all we mean is that the people who control the firms that create the goods and services that society produces. So we labor for these capitalists, but they're not making money literally off of our sweat. They're producing these commodities and they're selling these commodities in the market. And even if they want to be nice and give us higher wages, they would just probably get undercut by competitors that were even more ruthless and were able to reinvest more of their profits into the expansion of production. So whereas the market existed before, it has now become the all-consuming task of humanity to constantly expand and keep producing more and more at higher levels of efficiency and so on. And this has created tremendous wealth and abundance. No Marxist would deny that in many ways this is the pinnacle of human civilization. Like, look what we've managed to kind of transform the world for both good and bad, but mostly for good in the past 100 plus 200 years under capitalism. Our argument is that so much abundance has been created that socially, so the labor of thousands of people being brought together, millions of people being brought together, there must be some better way to distribute wealth and power. There must be a way to take this social production and not have it be run in a social way through the dictatorship of a small group of bosses and CEOs, and instead run the economy in a democratic way. So that's the premise of socialism. It's building off the development of capitalism, the high point of capitalism. It's not saying that we started year zero and we're back in the fields, sowing crops and things like that.
So in this, another thing that you do really effectively in this book, and I think it is worth, highlighting two things in that statement, right? So one, it truly is like a global system. So like even like the paradox of, like places that are like on the extreme end of, like, say in the media sense, they're covered as a place of civil war and instability. They're, I'm thinking of the Congo, right? It's dealt with, the United States install the CIA, the Belgians assassinated a great independence leader, Patrice Lumumba. Then they backed this, vicious dictator from the 60s, literally through the mid-90s, Mobutu Sese Seko, and then it's been in varying states of civil war. There's all of these different dimensions of the crisis of Congo. And then conversely, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the rare minerals that are mined from Congo are in all of our phones and central to the most complex parts of a global supply chain. So there's really like almost no corner of earth that is not part of this system. And similarly with Marx, Marxism went absolutely everywhere. There isn't a country on earth where these ideas didn't find some relevance, which is pretty extraordinary. And I think, I wanted to set that because you do also a really good job of this book of like disaggregating the different streams of Marxism. And I'm wondering if you can go back even just into the history of Marx and Engels, and what did Marxism and socialism first start looking like as a political project in those times, in terms of whether it's electoral or labor or revolutionary? What are the different streams that we start to get?
Yeah. So the logic was pretty common sense, it seemed, to the socialists of the 19th century. They thought that their primary struggle, or one of their big struggles, was fighting for trade unions and basic kind of organizations of class consciousness, and fighting for suffrage, fighting for more democracy. So this was the Chartist movement in the UK was all about. What all these other movements, the early struggles of the German Social Democratic Party, they were struggles to expand the franchise to working people. Because in most of these countries, to the extent there was any political democracy, it was limited to those who owned property. So it was the old landed gentry, and it was the new industrialists that were fighting and divvying up power. And the idea was this new emerging working class, this group of millions of people that were ripped from the countryside and now hoarded into these cities and working at these giant factories and complexes, these people would get the vote, and through the exercise of their franchise, they would naturally start voting for policies that were in their class interest. So in other words, it was seen as like a natural dynamic. Workers get the right to vote, workers organize, workers form workers' parties. These worker parties start legislating social and economic reforms and continue on the struggle for socialism, a system in which this voting majority, this majority class, takes over production and governs society generally in their interests. Now, obviously, it didn't work quite this way, but it seemed like it was in the late 19th century. So there were these mass parties. The most important of them is the German Social Democratic Party. But we saw what happens over time, which is that, well, in fact, these workers in these big parties are kind of dependent on their bosses. They are under a lot of pressures to compromise with the nation state that they're a part of. They realize that they win reforms and win gains often not just from confrontation, but from making compromises with their employers. They maybe decide, hey, wouldn't it be better off if we just tame the system a little bit and keep it humming and then redistribute some of the wealth that it's creating instead of forging a new system entirely? So this is where modern social democracy comes from. It was the attempt to just add doses of socialism within capitalism. Then there's a left wing of this big workers' movement, and it happens mostly in countries where the democratic road to social democracy, to socialism, is blocked. So the socialists have to pursue more insurrectionary, more revolutionary roads. So this is kind of Russia and the Soviet Union and all these cases. This is kind of the left wing, I guess you could say, of this broad workers' movement. But they had this common ancestor. And what I wanted to do in the book was to avoid the no true Scotsman thing, where you just say, oh, that's not real socialism.
Right.
Socialism is only the thing I like. And oh, if it's not democratic, it's not socialism. You know, obviously I have my vision of socialism, which is a democratic, anti-authoritarian, anti-hierarchical vision of socialism. But a lot of these experiences, positively and negatively, have important lessons for us to draw from. And all these movements are drawn from this early workers' movement. And obviously even these revolutionary movements in the Third World that fought for national liberation against imperialism and fought for development, a lot of them were inspired by the Soviet example, because the Soviet Union started off as an extremely backward, war-ravaged country in which the task became not how do you take the spoils of a rich society and make sure workers get their fair share and make sure there's working-class democracy, but rather how do you generate wealth to begin with. And I think that was the root of some of its authoritarianism or some of these dilemmas. But it was quite inspiring for people living in the Third World. It was inspiring for the Chinese revolutionaries and other people to say, look what the Soviet Union did in just 5 years. They caught up with the West. So I cover all this history, and I try to do it in a way that doesn't claim to be a book of history, but as an illustrative history where we could take some of these case studies, take some of these lessons, figure out what's relevant, what should we keep from this history, what we should discard. And I think it's an important part of it, because otherwise it would just be kind of the a purely moral argument. But socialism has actually been tried, and it's had its successes, but it's had its massive failure. And it doesn't do us any good if we're on the left to pretend like it hasn't.
So I think that's a really important distinction, and because I think it's both for actually not shying away from, even as an example, the fact that the Soviet Union, was on the right side of, the United States was supported apartheid. The Soviet Union backed the African National Congress, right? I mean, so, very strong point for the Soviet Union. Before Soviet imperialism in Afghanistan in the 80s, which is absolutely what I would call an intervention and the atrocities that they committed. But on the other hand, the Sour Revolution and some of the communist ideology of Afghanistan was incredibly progressive and interesting and innovative, and also helps us kind of historicize away from the typical anti-Muslim narratives.
But even in that case, if you think about who made the Sour Revolution,
it was Afghans.
A group of military. It was Afghans, but it was a group of military officers and intellectuals and people who were basically I hate to put it this way, but the modern classes in a society is still largely pre-modern. Right. And what happened when they tried to impose socialism and modernity from above, it led to a reaction, it led to civil war, and it led to a lot of the disasters that we've seen in that country for the last 20, 30 years. So even the best intentions, the best of our intentions have ended up sometimes in a bad place. And I wanted to look at some of that history and figure out why, while at the same time saying, listen, we're in the West. We're in countries that have really long established history of democracy. We're in countries where most of our fights today are for these broad programs like Medicare for All. We are in a very different context than trying to create a revolution in Afghanistan. And we have tons of we're very privileged in our position today. But obviously, if we don't know this history, if we don't have kind of strong replies, then we're going to end up just looking like idiots when people try to red bait us with some of the stuff.
And then we could, and I think that we can disentangle, and we'll get to Sanders in a couple of minutes, but I think, the very clear, essentially anti-regime change, a foreign policy that isn't dictated by a narrow set of interests here is the corollary. And then in the situations, inside the United States as an example, this is where you also start to foreground, ideas and histories which maybe they don't, they might be less alluring in a freshman dorm room, but they might in some ways be more relevant to a, hyper-developed 2019 context. So talk about Olof Palme and what happened in Sweden in the 1970s and what you're drawing from that.
Yeah, I think, well, one thing I should say before people just think it's a book of history, I try to open with a case for socialism and kind of a thought experiment of what a day in the life of a socialist citizen should look like. So I really did intend the book to be kind of the first book about socialism that a lot of people are gonna read, and it's meant to not scare off my Bernie Krat friends. And I've been doing some stuff lately with my friends at the Sanders campaign, and I've been I'm about gearing up to do some canvassing for Sanders. So that was the intended audience, I should say. But
yes, sir.
Social democracy is super interesting for me because I started off as a far left radical who had no interest in social democracy. It's like, oh, well, that's just a kinder, gentler capitalism. Then over time, the more study, the more research I did of social democracy, particularly the Nordic model, particularly in Sweden, you'd find out that, these models were actually imposed not by the generosity of capitalists. Oh, the Nordic capitalists, they're cozier, friendlier, people. But in fact, it was imposed by force, by militant working class movement. So over time, over the course of governing for 50, 60 years in Sweden, the Social Democrats were able to decommodify, which means just taking out of the market whole spheres of life, like some degree housing. They built 1 million new homes for public housing, 1 million units for a population of just 8 million. Healthcare, childcare eventually. All these things were taken out of the market and enjoyed as social rights. So it was a very good society in that sense. I think it's probably the peak of what we achieved as a species. If you were born in a poor rural part of Sweden, you had a very similar life outcome to if you were born in a nice district in Stockholm. And that's something you can't say about someone born in Fairfield, Connecticut versus Waterbury or something like that. You know, it's something that we shouldn't take for granted. Yeah, Bridgeport, which is, I've spent plenty of time in my life, actually. It's a very depressing city.
Yes.
So, enough about Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's where we lose the audience.
Hey, I have a lot of, hey, it's a great ferry. Just saying, there's a lot of, capitalism is a problem.
Yep. No, definitely. I mean, this is the kind of the uneven, development, but it's kind of the stuff that we take for granted. The fact that, that kid's from that city,
right.
or one screwed. We, like, as Americans, even those of us on the left, we kind of just take for granted that this is like a normal thing.
Right.
But it wasn't just that they achieved this base level of equality and dignity and justice for their citizens, and it wasn't just that Olof Palme and these other leaders fought to defend the ANC and to struggle against apartheid and to defend the Vietnamese and to struggle against U.S. imperialism in Vietnam. So they also had a good track record on foreign policy.
Yep.
But these demands and these welfare state securities didn't, like many Leninists thought it would, it didn't make them complacent. It actually caused workers to start demanding more and more radical things, and to start to make inroads on the profits of capitalists, but also their right to manage, the right of managers to manage. So in 1967, 1968, you see a mass strike wave in Sweden that's primarily about industrial democracy, not just wages and working conditions. So they start to put more radical questions on the table. They start to say, well, why don't we have any say in our day-to-day lives? We're spending 40 hours a week in this workplace. Why don't we have any say? Eventually they say, why don't we actually own some of this workplace? And there's a plan in the 70s put forward, the Meidner Plan, that's improved, massively approved by the Maid Trade Union Federation in Sweden, that would have slowly over time socialized production in Sweden. So what social democracy did was it increased the bargaining position of workers dramatically, but it left the levers of control in the hands of capitalists. So the capitalists seeing all this stuff to say, hold on, we're getting screwed by this intensifying internationalization of the economy in the 70s. The OPEC shock is hurting us. These wage demands are cutting into our profits. There's all these things going on. We're going to either leave capital flight or we're going to withhold investment. We're just not going to invest in new firms and expand our production until conditions change. Now, this is a blackmail that capitalists have in any capitalist democracy, even a social democracy. So what the left wing of social democracy in Sweden proposed were these wage earner funds essentially trying to socialize more production, taking away their power to withhold investment in this blackmail they had. The right wing of social democracy, people like in the UK, Gordon Brown, in Germany, Schroeder, these people had a solution to the crisis that involved retreating. All right, let's take a few steps back. Let's deregulate a little bit. Let's make capitalists happy. Then we'll try to redistribute some of the wealth that's being created to sustain 80% of our existing welfare state. This was the gamble of the third wave of social democracy. But I believe that there was a route to socialism through the left wing of social democracy. And the way that I came to see it through reading and research and really engaging seriously with the history of social democracy was it's not a separate playing field. Social democracy was getting the ball into the red zone, then getting pushed back just out of field goal position.
Right.
But what we want is a touchdown. We want to figure out a way to win the game, and that involves, I think, taking power away from capital and extending the democratic logic of social democracy. That, as by virtue of being humans, we have certain rights. We should, if democracy is a good thing in the ballot box, also have democracy in our workplaces. By extending this logic deeper, we actually have a chance to get to social democracy. So what I see Sanders and Corbyn and all these people doing is bringing back the language of class struggle, the language of social democracy. And I don't think it's enough, but if you can't put the question of Medicare for all on the table in the U.S. today, about decommodifying healthcare, how are you going to put the question of worker ownership in the means of production? The people on the left that are excited about one but not excited about the common sense thing that 70% of Americans support, do baffle me.
They absolutely baffle me too. And then of course, I think people, maybe they baffle me less, but some people who don't see, particularly if they're saying that they have a more kind of structurally left politics, even of a social democratic variety, and they don't see the structural case and what Sanders is doing that is a completely unique value proposition in modern politics. Even relative to other candidates that, we like and respect, that also frustrates me. And maybe I want to get into what Sanders is doing that no one else is doing. But first, I do want to play this ad. This is something that, you released or the Sanders campaign released for you. And I think this actually very eloquently distills this in the language of an ad. So let's play this and I'll throw it to you, Bhaskar.
We know how important it is to defeat Trump in 2020, but I'm afraid that after Trump, a right populism might exist in the U.S. for a long time to come. Sanders gives us the opportunity not just to win one election, but to create the vast progressive majority that can win election after election. This isn't a 4-year project. This is an 8-year project. This is a project to remake America and remake American politics for the next 10, 15, 20 years. For decades, working people in the United States have been told over and over again that it's their fault. You lost your job, it's your fault. Maybe you should reformat your CV. Maybe you should take a coding class. You're drifting deeper and deeper in medical debt. It's your fault. Maybe you should have seen the doctor more. Maybe you should start doing yoga, exercising a bit more. All these messages have been telling people that the problems of society were individual failings. That's why I was so inspired by the Sanders campaign, because in 2016, and again now, millions of people are realizing that it's not their fault. In fact, they should be expecting and demanding more, and that collectively, we could fight for things like Medicare for all. We could fight for things like a safe and sustainable environmental policy that will keep the planet going for our future generations. What we need is a return to shared prosperity and justice for all people. That's why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders.
I like the little look off you do at the end. Like, was that?
Yeah, I
did we
do
lock that?
I was like, are we still rolling? Yeah, I feel I'm embarrassed they kept that, but I love that the music behind me is like clearly the soundtrack to NBA Live 1999 or something. it's really incredible.
I was gonna say it kind of felt a little bit like almost a little they were more mellow, but I thought of almost like Diggable Planets or something. Like it had a very it did have a good 90s vibe to it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a throwback, and I'm still living in the past until the Knicks get KD. Then I'm ready to embrace 2019. Until then, I'm living in '99.
And then after a couple of months, when KD hurts his ankle or something, you'll be back to '99.
Well, I feel like that would just remind me of why I'm a Knicks fan. It's like
because
religion.
Of the struggle.
It's like the suffering is part of it.
The noble.
We have to pay the penance.
The beautiful struggle. Actually, okay. Well, I have a ridiculous question to ask you, but first let me just do this parenthetically. If Bill Bradley, who was a legendary Knick and probably I would say Barack Obama and Bill Bradley are like the best neoliberalism had to offer. If Bradley was to Bradley versus Sanders, who are you picking?
Oh, obviously I would choose Sanders. Come on.
Okay. Hey, I'm just testing your Knicks fandom.
That's easy.
All right. Fair enough.
But I would say Bradley, Obama, even Adam Silver, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. These seems like the type of neoliberals you could have a quick lunch with. You know what I mean?
Quick.
They wouldn't drive you absolutely crazy. You would just want to cut everything off at the 35-minute mark.
I think you're exactly right. So what does Sanders bring to the table that is distinct in terms of activating people and also for that much longer term struggle? Because I agree with you. I've been saying for a really long time, I don't agree with framing the election on only this or that candidate can beat Trump. I think a lot of them could beat Trump or horrifyingly, we might be in a position where maybe very few of them can beat Trump, right? But the point is that Joe Biden could definitely beat Trump. I think people on our side of the equation have steadily underestimated his appeal, unfortunately. But what happens in 2022? I mean, if you have yet another cycle of unresponsive mediocrity, while all of the crises of society are untreated, granted the emergency of the white supremacist corrupt Trump administration, of course, needs to be removed, period. But that's just getting back to a basic baseline where we're not fighting savagery like kidnapping children, which is absolutely essential, but it is not long-term durable for inequality, for the climate, for police, for all of these other issues that are structural and long-term. What is Sanders bringing to this that no one else has for at least the potential of getting out of a broader predicament?
Yeah, it's not just defeating Trump, it's about defeating Trumpism, right? And I think we have to think about what was the appeal of Trump. Now, obviously, hardcore Trump supporters are the racists or the xenophobes that we can't win over under any circumstance. Then a big chunk of his base are just traditional, wealthier Republican voters that we don't want in our coalition.
Right.
But let's find that 25% of the Trump base, and let's think about what motivated these people. And I think part of it was anger. Part of it was, I'm going to do the thing that the political establishment doesn't want me to do. And for me, what spoke to them from Trump was speaking to the anger. And that's something that Sanders can summon, but these other Democratic candidates aren't really meaningfully summoning. The idea that, I want people to blame. And that's why he keeps saying millionaires and billionaires. He's naming some names. He's saying stop Jeff Bezos. He's saying all these things that I think are summoning kind of a passion and anger that's out there. People are fed up, and either they're going to vote with their anger, or they're going to vote out of fear. I think you're right, by the way, enough people would vote out of fear and say, we don't want, Trump. This guy is like too much.
Yeah.
So you will get a good turnout this election. I think Biden will probably beat Trump.
Yes.
But then there's going to be, I think, a chunk of people that are potentially going to stay at home, maybe not in this election, but in the next election. If it doesn't seem like things are changing, if it doesn't seem like the Democrats are trustworthy, if all they have to offer is we're not Republicans, it's not a very strong appeal. It's not a strong message, and that's something that really Hillary Clinton didn't motivate people to vote. It was Latino voters not showing up. It was black voters not showing up. It wasn't just white working class voters switching over in a few swing states. It was more just the people getting fed up and just not wanting to show up. And who could really blame them on especially if you're working 8 to 6 on election day, you have kids at home, you have all the stress, you don't even get the day off. Are you going to stand in line for an hour to vote for someone who doesn't inspire you? It's a tough ask.
Well, right, and that's actually why the best thing the Democrats have actually done in the House is introduce a really good voting rights package, which is essential and shocking that morally and strategically they haven't been pushing for decades. But, that being, I think, and again, whether it's 25% of Trump voters, I might think it's 2 or 3%, frankly. But that 2 or 3% is geographically.
Swing an election.
They're located in the map that you need to win. And just to put a fine point on it, because I do think that this distinction is arising, and I've, my position for a long time, and I know you have to go in a minute, has definitely been, look, even candidates that I don't, have any trust for at all, in terms of their commitment to these things, like Beto O'Rourke or Christian Gillibrand or whoever, if people are coming on board for single payer, postal banking, or whatever, that's great. Let's give them praise. But now we're in an election, and now it's like I think it's even important to start in a collegial, respectful way, because again, I do draw a red line. I do think it's Bernie and Warren. I think it's Bernie on his own in terms of distinct contribution, but I do think it's Bernie and Warren versus the rest of the field, in the sense that Warren is clearly infinitely preferable to, it goes without saying, Biden, but certainly any of the other, centrist, center-right candidates.
I think there's a big gap between Bernie and Warren, but I think there's an equally big, if not bigger, gap between Warren and everyone else.
Right, I agree. That's exactly how I'd put it. But what is that distinction between this broader strategic argument and just putting out a lot of really good policy proposals, which is great and essential, but it feeds, in my view, the same kind of failings of a certain belief in technocracy versus power. That's at least how I'd frame it. But what do you think?
Well, I think that Warren at heart is a regulator, right? She wants a fairer, better capitalism. She wants capitalism where the rules are clear and it's not rigged against working people. Sanders, I think, is more fundamentally questioning the system.
Right.
I think he's been a far more resolute defender of Medicare for all.
Yep.
I think, and that's probably the most radical part of his program, just the way he wants to take on the health insurance industry through a full frontal, assault. Now, looking at her response on Medicare for all makes me worry that Warren would choose maybe the path of preemptive compromise, whereas Sanders will at least try to tackle these interests and name names a little bit more. But more importantly, I think, is the fact that Sanders is actually galvanizing a grassroots of millions of people in a way that Warren isn't. So we have to think about who just won't be the better president to pass some policy for the next 4 years or 8 years. We have to think about who can create the opposition movement or the foundation of the long-term opposition movement for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So if you're a progressive, if you're a socialist, we have to be thinking about how do we remake American politics in the next 5 to 20 years. Our job won't be done in 2020. It won't be done even in 2024. And it seems to me that Sanders is the one capable of really galvanizing passions and pushing in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's precisely my take. And I also recommend always Megan Day, who I've interviewed plenty of times and is another great writer, The Jacobin. She really put this very well recently. The book is The Socialist Manifesto, The Case for Radical Politics in an Age of Extreme Income and Extreme Inequality. We didn't even talk about the ecological collapse that we're on the verge of. I will say that Bhaskar is also a regular on TMBS, and I'll be talking with him again soon. But definitely buy this book, get your subscription to The Jacobin, help forward these visions, these ideas, and also these movements. Bhaskar, thanks so much for doing this.
Yep, that's great. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Take care. All right, folks, we're going to take a brief break, and we're going to come back with a comedian by the name of David Feldman. Welcome back to the Majority Report Casual Friday. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is the host, the illustrious host of the David Feldman Show. He's also a comedy writer, stand-up comedian. You've seen his work in any number of television outlets. He's written for all sorts of people, including people that I make fun of on a fairly consistent basis. David Feldman, thanks for being here.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. I'm assuming Matt, Brendan,
Okay.
can you guys hear DF?
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so I just have to keep this short because I'm doing Sam Cedar's show today. So I just wanna-
Really?
So, until they call me, because I'm expecting a call from Sam Cedar. So the minute he calls, I have to hang up. But I love your show. So.
Yeah, you like the sort of A for effort kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
David, you had a couple requests for me before we came on. You wanted to, and people are jonesing over this, but I guess we'll get to that later. But you had something that you wanted to say about Ben Shapiro. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with everything he stands for.
Right.
In principle,
In principle,
But in principle, here's the thing: I watched the clip of his walking off that BBC interview, and I'm opposed to this man in principle, but I think he realized if you watch during that interview, it dawns on Ben that he's talking to somebody from England, and he walked off because he didn't want to violate the Logan Act.
So in other words, okay, so I'm assuming because the Logan Act is in the news because Donald Trump has accused John Kerry of violating the Logan Act. And you think what actually happened is that Ben Shapiro is so, as the New York Times called him, the cool kid's philosopher, he's so acute intellectually that he thought to himself, wait a second, I'm BBC, British government, who funds it? That's a public broadcast. Logan Act, I got to get out of here.
He's in violating of I think it's called the Logan Paul Act. I don't know. I studied this kind of stuff.
Did you? So he wasn't having a temper.
Deep into the weeds.
Okay, but we won't get into the weeds. But in other words, he wasn't having a temper tantrum. He was just trying to obey the law.
There is a law on the book, and I get. I don't want to come off as too esoteric, and because I know you're a big picture guy. You don't get into the weeds on minutia, but it's actually called the Logan Paul Act, and it outlaws YouTube celebrities from trivializing suicide. So it's the Logan Paul Act, and Ben he does not want to trivialize suicide the way Logan Paul did. It's against the law.
Did you think?
By the way, I have a comedy writer. If I could work for Logan Paul, I would be so happy. He's the voice of a generation.
Oh, thank you. Did you think when you were coming up in show business that one day there would be a way to build like a pundit profile for yourself? Not just a pundit profile, but a pundit profile as like a preeminent conservative intellectual by humiliating 19-year-olds in college campuses and then getting them clipped up for the internet? Did you anticipate that?
Well, I used to humiliate college co-eds when I was in college, but I didn't know you could make money doing that.
You had no idea.
I never.
By telling them that they were stupid, that you could get clipped and get paid by oligarchs to give talks.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get paid playing video games.
Right.
I'm looking into that.
Did you see the ad that Delta did? They encouraging their people not to join a union because for their union dues, they could buy a game console.
Listen, you know that I am pro-union in principle, right?
In principle, yes.
In principle. Yeah. But, the labor movement is only about 150 years old. We have to go slowly on this.
Right.
So, and Delta, yes, theoretically, in principle, I would love my stewardesses and my pilots to have health care because, I don't want them to crash the plane. In principle, I don't want them to crash the plane. But we have to be adults, okay?
So, David, I'm sensing a theme here with this in principle and, sort of abstract goals versus concrete actions. And it's disturbing me because I thought that you were a Bernie supporter, but you sound to me like you might be switching sides here to someone like Biden or Buttigieg.
No. Oh, no, come on now. I love Bernie.
Okay, good.
I love Bernie in principle. I and you know me. We've had you know
Yes.
that my heart bleeds when we talk about socialized medicine and the 60,000 Americans who die each year because they're underinsured. You've seen my eyes well up.
Yep.
I care.
Yep.
You know that. But right now, we need to put everything on the back burner and defeat Trump.
Oh.
Now is not the time to worry about the 33% of American children who are food insecure, or that we have only 11 years before the planet is destroyed. We have a constitutional crisis, and those only come around every 3 years. This is a constitutional crisis because we have to stop everything to figure out what the subpoena power is of the House Judiciary Committee. Because if Jerry Nadler cannot have Mueller testify before the House Judiciary Committee, everything will fall apart. The whole world will come crashing down.
Yeah.
And we have to be adults.
Right.
And put everything on the back burner and focus on defeating Trump. Not impeachment, just defeating Trump.
Well,
and then we can focus on the important stuff.
Right. Naturally. I mean, I think that you're reflecting certainly that sounds like the opinion of most of the Democratic leadership. But I'm confused by this, David. And, I think we have a little bit of a different perspective on this. But I'm genuinely confused because I'm totally we have to defeat Trump and also make sure that the food supply stays on Earth. And, and those 33% of children that are food insecure, we need to take care of immediately. We can't back burner it.
Yes.
So that's why I'm voting for Sanders. But that being said, I don't.
He can't win. I don't mean to interrupt you. He can't win.
Can we get to that in a second?
Win.
Can we get to that in a second, though? I disagree with you, but I want to talk about why
I want to ask you a question.
Why can't Congress? And I'm serious, David, because I don't spend any time talking about Mueller or any of this stuff, but it seems to me that regardless of what you think of Russia or blah, 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 that Donald Trump has broken the law repeatedly. Mnuchin is ignoring Congress. Barr is ignoring Congress. Why, if this actually is a problem, why can't they impeach him today instead of all of these telephone games that they're playing all the time? Explain that to me.
Okay. First of all, we're on the same team, right? So we're not going to do the circular firing squad here,
sure.
Because the last thing we want is the Democratic Party to hive off into separate little groups and not show up on Election Day to defeat Trump. So let me just say up front, and my eyes are welling up right now, and you know that I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. So we're on the same team,
right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and again, I love Bernie, and I believe in everything this man stands for in principle. So let me talk to you about why you can't impeach.
Okay. Why can't we impeach?
You can't impeach because we're a nation of laws, and the American people need to be taught a lesson that nobody is above the law. That's why we can't impeach. That's why. That's why Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman are going to prison. Not that their crimes were that bad, but we have to set an example and remind the Americans that everybody has to play by the rules, including Congress. And Trump has to go. He has to be defeated by the American people, but the Democrats have to play by the rules. And the rules are Democrats don't do anything.
until, or
You
what is
have
it?
to obey the rules.
So the rules are is that what Elijah Cummings meant, Congressman Elijah Cummings, when he said the American people need to wake up? And he said that yesterday, and some of us were a little bit like, I thought, didn't we give the Democrats congressmen?
Yes, to be reminded of what makes America great. To
In
tell
principle?
us, in principle, but to actually go through an impeachment, that will alienate the vast swaths of Americans who don't think impeachment is right.
Right.
We have to worry more about what the crowds think, what the mob thinks, and the rule of law. Which, this is like, I don't mean to get esoteric and in the weeds with you, because
right.
I know you're a big picture guy.
I'm what they call, I'm an ideas man. Really,
yeah,
I don't like to talk about people. I like to talk about ideas.
Yeah. And believe me, no, I would like to take Donald Trump out into the, back behind the schoolyard and, punch him. Believe me.
Right.
I'd like to knock him out. But no, you got to be adults. You got to be adults.
So every poll suggests that Bernie Sanders is one of the most popular politicians in the country, and that he runs well head to head with Donald Trump. I wouldn't necessarily put too much weight into any poll at this time, but I will. He's one of the only people in American politics that has stayed steadily positive with a lot of exposure, and the sights of the Democratic establishment and the Republicans all reining in on him. Why do you think he's unelectable?
Well, I think he's clearly unelectable. The polls, go to his rallies.
Okay.
Have you been to any of his rallies?
Yes,
Because, we're trying to, you can't win unless you get those white, working man, male Democratic moderates.
Right.
You can't win an election without them. And if you go to a Bernie rally, it's very threatening to ordinary Americans. The crowds are way too big. They're very boisterous, enthusiastic.
Right.
Did you see Bernie at the town hall on Fox News? If that wasn't a reason not to vote for him, because he does something to an audience. He won over the town hall, the Fox News town hall, and that's very threatening to Democrats like me who live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And you cannot win an election without appealing to us.
Right.
It's
right.
almost demagogic the way he tells people not only what they want to hear, but what they actually need.
Right.
You can't win an election by appealing to the American people's actual needs. That's not what Democrats do, and we have to obey the laws. There are laws. Democrats just are nostalgic. That's all.
Right. So in other words, if you're making, like, say you're making under $40,000 a year, and maybe you're working 2 jobs, maybe you're about to lose a job, and you're in Pennsylvania.
I don't want to hear about that. I know. I don't want to hear about that.
Right. You wouldn't want to hear about that, but maybe that person. But who knows? Maybe the preoccupations.
Are there people like that?
I think there's a lot of people like that. Yeah, I think even if you walked, even to this day with all the gentrification, you could walk, I don't know, 20, 30 blocks up from where you are and find some people really catching a lot of hell on the Upper East Side.
Okay, so just help me out here because I'm a details guy. Okay. I talk to Rob Reiner a lot, and I don't want to lord my relationship with Rob Reiner over you because we really get into policy. When you say $40,000 a year working 2 jobs,
right?
That doesn't qualify as middle class, as I understand it, right?
Well, I think I think you might. I don't know what the number is, but I know that the official government numbers on a lot of these things are actually not very generous. So I don't know.
Well, all I know is
I don't know what officially puts you.
Joe.
Okay, you're going for. Okay, yeah. So why do you think that Joe Biden, because again, I noticed with the taking Donald Trump behind the school, that was a Joe Biden line. So clearly you've been imbibing Biden. Why do you think Joe Biden is the right way to go? What makes him the most electable?
Because he's middle class.
Right.
And you can't win the election without appealing to the middle class. And, Bernie is focusing on, the lower classes. And that's not what the Democratic Party is about. We're about the middle class, not the 150 million Americans who can't scrape up $500 in case of an emergency. I get that. 150 million Americans, nearly half this country, can't find $500 without going into debt. That's not who we're going after. We're going after the middle class. Eventually, I'm concerned. And look, I don't know if this is the phone, but my eyes are welling up right now when I think about those people. And I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
So I can relate pain and suffering. You know that I can relate to pain and suffering. My son fell in love with a widow anyway, I don't even want to get into it, but I can relate to pain and suffering. But I'm middle class.
Right.
I made a lot of money, but I'm middle class in my thinking, and it's incrementalism. We'll work our way down. Let's just start with focusing on the middle class, and then we'll work our way down to starving children in America.
Sure.
But let's do it incrementally, and that's what I love about Joe Biden. He's an adult.
He's definitely certainly an adult. When you think so I think we just have a disagreement about what we need to take care of and how fast we need to take care of things. But you said earlier, and even the middle class, because
Hey, it's not me. It's Rob Reiner.
So tell Rob Reiner about the barbell economy. But I don't want to get into the weeds.
The barbell economy.
It's the idea that it's all, and it's probably not even a great image because there's way more on the bottom, obviously, than at the top. But the idea is that the weight is at the top is on two sides, and the middle there's nothing in the middle. The middle is just a bar.
What's the hockey stick?
I don't know. That's a climate change
I like
thing.
the hockey stick.
Well, the
hockey stick is climate change?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you, because you yourself said earlier that we might have 11 years to keep the earth inhabitable for people, frankly, like your son. And I don't know how old the widow is. But Joe Biden today apparently is announcing a centrist plan on the climate. Does that really sound like something that's going to keep the earth alive?
You have to reach across the aisle and negotiate with carbon dioxide. Otherwise, it's not going to work with you. And Joe Biden has a history of reasoning with climate change. That's how we defeated Hitler. I mean, I know, you lose the argument when you bring up Hitler, but we defeated Hitler. We sat down with him and said, we're reaching across the aisle, kill 6 million and stop there. You negotiate. It's all a numbers game. That's what Joe will do.
So if Joe Biden was president in the 30s, he would have offered the 6 million deal for Hitler.
He would have gone in low.
Is that what Rob Reiner said?
And he would have said Hitler's a decent guy.
Right.
That's all. That's the key to all of it.
Was Hitler middle class?
Come in. Hitler was middle class. Yes, very bourgeois in his thinking.
Right.
But don't get me started on that because you just had a guest on. I don't about socialism. Hitler was a socialist. So I don't want to get in there. It's in the name Nazi.
Right.
It's an acronym. I don't want to get too smart for you because I'm lording my supreme intellectual knowledge over you.
Right.
But I was watching Ladder with Crowder, and he told me that Nazi means socialism.
Right.
So he was a socialist.
Well, I can't argue with that. I don't have. So
just listen. Let me ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hang on.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to be a bully. and because I'm trying to bring everybody into the tent. Okay.
Right. Right.
And
in principle,
and I'm welcoming. And am I being likable here?
Very.
Am I being likable?
Very. I would say middle
Likeable,
class.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And you know, I've had tragedy in my life.
Yes.
Year after year. I've been incredibly unlucky. If you look at my biography,
right.
One tragedy after another. And I've never won an election other than senator from Delaware, but I'm going to bring all my good luck to America. That's what I want to do, is bring all my good luck that I've had in my life to America, because I'm a lucky guy, and I think luck rubs off on a nation. But Rob Reiner, that's what Rob Reiner told me, and he cares, Rob Reiner, and he directed The Ghosts of Mississippi. Did you see Ghosts of Mississippi?
It was very powerful.
Great movie.
I think I saw some of it on TNT before I was trying to find a basketball game. But yes.
Yeah. That is a movie. Let me just say something to you young people. Rob Reiner directed Ghosts of Mississippi. And that is a movie about, I don't know who the black guy was, but it was something about voting in the South,
right,
and trying to get into his house. Anyway, it's like it really taught me the importance of black people, and we have to something with them. I'm nervous. I can't remember what Ghost of It. I know it was about a black guy, and Alec Baldwin was then back then. And
you support civil rights in principle.
Civil rights, yes.
Right.
And you know why we have civil rights in this country?
Why?
We went slowly on it.
Right. Well, that was what MLK was about. I mean, and also reaching out to the middle class. That was why he was in Tennessee, to organize the middle class.
Huh?
He was in Tennessee to organize a middle class march.
Yeah, the garbage strike.
Yeah, the rally to restore sanity with Dr. King.
Yes, it's so easy.
Right.
So and what I love as a comedy writer is Dr. Martin Luther King said, incrementalism is a sin. And as a comedy writer, I appreciate his sarcasm. When he said incrementalism is a sin, I go, God, this guy is using wit and comedy. He's got it. Like he would have killed at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with that kind of stuff.
That actually,
your listeners,
could you imagine though? Everybody's here tonight. Dana Bash is here. BuzzFeed was here, but Facebook changed the algorithm on them. No, I'm just kidding. How's everybody doing?
All right. Well, you know what?
You got any movie recommendations for us, David?
Yeah, everything by Rob Reiner. if Rob Reiner directs, let me tell you something. When it comes to how to live your life, here's a general rule of thumb.
Yes.
Always ask first, what would Rob Reiner do? That's the key to life. What would Rob Reiner do? Would Rob Reiner eat this?
Yes.
Would Rob Reiner approve of this?
I don't know.
Rob Reiner's voting for Biden.
I know, Rob Reiner. Jesus Christ. Rob Reiner really.
I have the perfect running mate. Want to know who I think the perfect running mate for
Biden? Rob Reiner.
I'm sorry?
Rob Reiner.
I wish, but he's got to make more great movies.
Yeah, right.
Like The Bucket List.
Who should be Biden's running mate?
Well, I kind of wish maybe we can get like a Kickstarter campaign that raises about $1 million for me to move to Los Angeles and lobby Rob Reiner to run for president. And, if we can get $1 million, I could, set up a 501c3 and pay my kids a salary.
One of the things
Does
I
that
like about
interest you?
I would think one of the things I like about your podcast is you really do have a very detailed understanding of how modern politics works, and I think you're demonstrating that in your Kickstarter.
I don't know
idea.
Well, I think I think it's a good use of Kickstarter. But anyway,
I think you
perfect
should have
running mate
moved
for
to the
Joe.
right, David. I think you could be headlining CPAC. You're a
Oh, I
lot
hate
fun.
them.
You're much funnier than Dennis Miller, and people
Oh,
might
those
understand what your
people are-
references are.
I hate those people in principle, and they sicken me. And you saw me. I was at the Javits Center when Hillary lost, and you've seen pictures of me.
Yeah,
I couldn't get out of bed
for a
I
month.
couldn't get out of bed for 5 days. I couldn't get out of bed for 5 days when Hillary lost. And I lead with that at parties. People have to know up front that I hate Donald Trump.
Right, of course.
Everybody needs to know that I hate Donald Trump. But that's who I am.
It's
because
a
I
real
care about the country.
differentiator. Because there's a lot of people that
sorry?
like it's a real differentiator because in journalists and entertainment and comedy circles in Manhattan as an example, you run into a lot of people that like Donald Trump.
Yeah, I hate him.
Yeah,
Ooh,
no,
I hate him.
well,
Oh, I hate that man. Ooh, hate him. I always lead with that, especially in Hollywood. When I'm with Rob Reiner, I just go to his cocktail parties and they don't get David started on Donald. Ooh, I hate him. Visceral. It's visceral. Ooh. And then people like me. And then I have to remind people that we have a constitutional crisis.
right,
And these things only happen every 6 months.
right. But that somehow we can't do anything about it because Democrats are constitutionally mandated to do nothing. Because we got to
Not
win.
do nothing. No, you're twisting my words to remind us of how great things were once upon a time, and that we're better than this. That's the role of Democrats, to tell us who we are. When there's a shooting, anybody can outlaw guns when you're the president. Sign an executive order,
Right.
taking away the NRA. Obama could have taken away the NRA's tax-exempt status, but he did something more important when that church was shot up. He said, "That's not who we are." And then he sang Amazing Grace. That's
You know, one of the most devastating parts of a Feldman bit are when it's like, yes, that's literally exactly what happens. Yes.
this is not a bit. This is like, why do you think this is a bit?
I apologize.
Anyway, here's who I think Joe's running mate could be.
Okay, tell me.
Okay,
Yes.
and and this is my being an adult. Okay,
Yes, please.
you know how Joe has listen, Joe has a woman problem. He's not perfect, right?
Sure. So who should his running mate be?
Okay, hear me out,
Okay.
Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete. Now,
Wait. How
You
would
know.
how would this solve his woman problem?
because he's gay. Did you know that Mayor Pete is gay?
I knew that he's gay, and I know that he's a gentrifier and a military guy. That's what I know about Mayor Pete, and he gets it.
Yeah, but he's gay.
Okay,
But he's gay.
right. So
Did you know that he's gay?
yes, I did know that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And I agree with you. I have a lot of problems with Mayor Pete. Rob Reiner is furious at him for what went on in South Bend. There was something with the African American police chief that he fired, and
Yep.
something demolishing black people's houses, something black people being rounded up by it's a Ghost of Mississippi thing. Rob, you should rent the movie. I know I'm swearing. But he's got a problem with the black people, and believe me, a mayor running a city, and by the way, that's a lot of responsibility to be running the fourth largest city in Indiana. I mean, that is, he's up against a lot. So yeah, whatever, something with the blacks.
Isn't there a mayor from Florida who runs a city that's bigger than Mayor Pete, who nobody's paying any attention to. I don't even know the guy's name.
Is he gay?
He's a black man.
Is he gay?
He's an African American man. He's black.
No.
So what the hell?
Does he go slowly on things?
I think he does. Well, I think unfortunately I think the problem with him is that he supports fully abolishing ICE. So you guys might not be as excited. That doesn't sound very middle class, I guess.
Oh, I hate ICE. Oh, I stay with Rob Reiner. And I hate it. Ooh, I hate what they're doing. I hate what they're doing to Rob Reiner's cleaning people. I hate them. And
does Rob Reiner have a poster welcoming refugees that he shows to the people that clean and maintain his home? Refugees are welcome here.
He tells the undocumented workers who work for him, I've been there. He said, do not talk to ICE. You'll be violating the Logan Act. You cannot talk to foreigners. It's a violation of the Logan Act. And, they're going around. I stay with Rob Reiner when I'm in Hollywood. Right. I'm not trying to lord my relationship, but, he's got 7 undocumented workers working for him, and we're terrified that they're going to get rounded up for ICE. So what we did on Wednesday was we got them an Uber, a big Uber, and took them. We sprung for an Uber just on Wednesday.
You wanted to make sure because maybe what some people don't know, I don't know if you know, but the Uber and Lyft drivers were striking because the companies have them in an indentured servitude system and they can't make a living. And so they were asking people not to use the services on Wednesday afternoon. And that was the time that you and Rob chose to send his undocumented cleaning people away from his home to evade ICE in an Uber. Do I understand you correctly?
I don't know what you're talking about. You're saying Uber? That's ride sharing. You have a car. It's capital. That's like Uber is socialism. You of all people should know that it's ride sharing. Remember?
Right. Well, I do remember. I think that was the first branding for these services in about like 2013 and 14. Yes.
As a socialist, I can't believe you're putting down Uber. I have a car. You need to go somewhere. I'll share my car with you. It's beautiful, like Airbnb. I'm going to share my home with you. Why would you make fun of that?
Well, I think I'm making fun of it because I think the execution is different than the sales pitch. So you're going through an app. Yeah.
I don't know. You lost me at execution. I'm against capital punishment. So, and
in principle?
No. I'm against capital punishment. I believe.
All right, fair enough.
Let me ask you a question about Uber, though.
Yes.
If Uber's so bad as you say it is, why is Arianna Huffington on the board of directors?
You mean because
Arianna Huffington? Do you know who Arianna Huffington is?
I do. I mean, you do know that there was a lot of controversy at Huffington Post about not paying people for blog posts, maybe some not great labor practices.
It's work sharing. It's a sharing economy. It's work sharing.
It's work sharing.
It's work sharing.
I believe when people were fired at Huffington Post, I think it was that they were disengaged. Was what they called it. Disengaged.
I think they weren't getting enough sleep, and I think that's what.
You've been reading Arianna's work on the sleep revolution?
I think that Arianna came back to the Huffington Post. She looked around and said, you know what? You have bags underneath your eyes. You need more sleep. You're fired. Go home and sleep. Hopefully you'll be depressed. You should go into a depression, so you'll just stay in bed all day. And that's the best thing for your health. It's just to be depressed, immobile, have no money. almost like disappear, fall through the cracks, so you can just focus on your sleep. That's what Ariana was trying to do for them.
So it was actually
she didn't make
it was
any money
altruistic.
off. What?
So it was altruistic. So David,
I'm sorry, I
you're
didn't hear what you said.
I said it was altruistic. David, you're we only have like a minute left or so, but I just have to say you're a horrible person. You were like
In principle,
everything.
in principle.
Every single evil tendency of the modern media and Democratic Party and corporate practice, you are embodying from Rob Reiner to Uber. I mean, Jesus, you're terrible.
You know what?
Joe
I don't know
Biden to
are you
Ariana
doing like
Huffington?
Is this a sarcasm thing that you're doing?
No, I'm not.
Or do you really mean that I'm horrible?
I'm not sophisticated enough to do sarcasm. I speak from the gut.
Do you really think I'm a horrible person?
Middle class. I mean, David.
I'm sorry?
This is horrible. It is. It's horrible.
But I hate Trump. How can I be horrible if I hate Trump? And you know, I talk really loud at Starbucks about the constitutional crisis and pound the table and how I want to punch. Like I hate Bill Barr.
Right. You want to hit him.
I want to punch him. Take him out behind the schoolyard and punch him. How am I a horrible person? The first thing I open with is I hate Trump.
This is becoming so triggering. This is like why I don't watch MSNBC. It's just a bunch of absolutely horrible people who think that recognizing that Donald Trump is a horrible human being is some type of exemplary behavior. What do you want, a cookie?
I love you, man.
I love you
what
so
Matt
much.
Taibbi does on
Please.
your show. I love. Huh?
No, I just got to say to people, please, I don't listen to many podcasts, but I listen to your podcast almost every episode. It's great, and the commentaries, even the bit on Uber. I mean, I know that you just did this really smart insight, like this history of the rideshare scam. You do a commentary, then you. I mean, what other show are you going to have Ben Burgess and then Jackie the Joke Man Martling on?
By the way, Ben Burgess, before I know we're at it, I love you, man.
I love you too.
Sam, you're the best. But Ben Burgess has really turned me on to Marxism.
Yes.
I owe you for that, so thank you. And, you know, we're all in this together in all seriousness, and I mean this, that, you know, we're all part of the same fabric of the universe. And I've learned that because you've allowed Ben Burgess to come on and my show and teach me about Marxism. So I'm going to ask you for a favor.
Sure.
Don't take this the wrong way. I need exclusivity with Ben. He can only do my show. I think pushing Marxism is a zero-sum game.
Right.
There are winners and losers, and I'm poaching your Marxist professor because I want to be the #1 purveyor of Marxism on the internet. I think I can win this way.
Well, I support that in principle.
Thank you.
David Feldman, please. I love you so much.
I love your show. I love Sam's show, and I love your show, and I love when you like talk to Professor Richard Wolff and go, so what's the deal with your dad? You ever kick it with them? You still get along with your dad? I love how you probe into their personal life. Get them to talk about their struggles.
He's doing a fucking Marin bit. Yeah, I have Richard Wolff on. I go like, you studied Althusser, but who are your guys? Who are your guys? Lenin, man. I tried to read Lenin once after a terrible breakup. I love you, David.
I love you.
All
Thank
right.
you. Let's get coffee or something.
Of course. I'll text you.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Seriously, I am a big fan of the David Feldman podcast. He's so funny, and he's also like, he's there. There's a similarity with Sam in the sense that, I mean, I guess Sam is like basically, at this point more commentator, journalist than comedian. But like David's maybe still a little bit more comedian, but he will do 20 minutes on stock buyback policy as well. Guy is highly policy fluent in addition to being so funny. All right, we don't have that much time left, so we're going to get to the fun half, and we're definitely going to get to this Ben Shapiro clip. We're going to get to Bernie talking about this great new bill that he just unveiled with AOC. A little bit of an interview with Lula, and we'll take some IMs, but I have a feeling we'll probably spend a lot of time on this Ben Shapiro thing. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. That's how this show happens. Check out the Antifada on Patreon. Matt, what's going on with Literary Hangover?
The Song of Hiawatha by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow will be out tomorrow.
Go to patreon.com/TMBS for a huge amount of content. Tuesday, Emma Vigland's coming in studio, and also Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. We'll see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Homo says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck 'em.
Homo says what?
What?
Homo says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Welcome to the fun half. All right. Ben Shapiro has the reputation of being a great intellectual. Now, I'll say that I am actually dealing with his new book because I have to write a chapter about him for my book. And one of the themes of my book is that this whole modern right-wing sort of frame and IDW is a massive fight against historicity in general. And while, obviously Sam Harris is structurally ahistorical and Jordan Peterson has his, mythology over history kind of thing, I would argue. Ben Shapiro does like, I don't even know, it's like 1950s Reader's Digest sort of cartoon. I guess if like a, I don't know, if like a seventh grader watched like Red Dawn or something and got like a quotable book of classics. I don't know.
If he
it's
wasn't
very dumbed down stuff.
If he didn't start as a teenager and instead was just like a 40-year-old National Review editor with his exact same opinions, he'd be utterly unremarkable.
Well, and I think a lot of people think that, Jonah Goldberg sort of had a reputation of being a, not bright guy, but a guy who, had pretensions of intellect, but was sort of broadly understood to be, a nepotism case with a very limited capacity. So here is Ben Shapiro. He's talking to Andrew Neil. Now, Andrew Neil is a quite right-wing figure in a British context. I believe he's the editor of The Spectator.
He's something
chairman of The Spectator.
Yeah, chairman of The Spectator.
Spectator's right-wing.
Yeah, but don't blame him for The Spectator writing puff pieces about Golden Dawn, for instance.
Because he's not in editorial control.
Yeah, that's what he said. Owen Jones went after him for that, and Andrew Neil's like, I don't don't put that on me. I'm only the chairman of the whole magazine.
Sure, okay, but he's yes, a man of the right, but he's able to do. I mean, this is just a British interview. If they interviewed any of us, they would go like, "You say you support socialism, however, socialism has killed millions, so." You want people to die, but Ben Shapiro's in his bag. He's triggered. He's in his feelings, and he's also just what a whiny little thing. Let's check this out.
It is intellectual sneering of the highest order to suggest that only the left has new and decent ideas.
Some of the ideas that are popular in your side of politics would seem to take us back to the Dark Ages, Georgia, new abortion laws, which you are much in favor of, that a woman who miscarries could get 30 years. A Georgian woman who travels to another state for an abortion procedure could get 10 years. These are extreme hard policies.
Well, okay, a couple of things. One, I'm not sure. I mean, frankly, I don't know whether are you an objective journalist or are you an opinion journalist?
I'm a journalist that asks questions.
Okay, so you're a supposedly objective journalist calling policies with which you disagree barbaric and suggesting only one side of the political.
I will just remind you that we highlighted a case a couple days ago of an 11-year-old rape victim who is pregnant and, as that law is currently written, could be forced to carry that baby to term. I don't know what other word you would reserve barbarism for, let alone imprisoning women for, exercising control over their health. I mean, to say the least. But, but Ben, again, he's getting very triggered and freaked out by this. And this is just so interesting. I mean, this is an entire brand that was built off of going to a college campus and, superficially through word tricks and gamesmanship eviscerating some 18-year-old who asked them a question. And he can't even deal with one just sort of basic round of British questioning, which anybody who has it's kind of stunning that Ben Shapiro has this little exposure to British media as it seems to, appear. But anyways, go ahead. The abortion one will continue, but this is the beginning of a prolonged tantrum.
Barbaric and suggesting only one side of the political aisle has ideas. So I just want to point out that I wish you would at least be honest in your own biases.
Mr. Shapiro, I know that broadcasting in America is now so polarized that on one program you only have the left and another one you just have the right. My job is to question those who have strong views and put an alternative to them. If you were an anti-abortion person, I would be putting pro-abortion questions to you. But you are
really would you call the pro-choice position?
So why don't you just answer my question,
sir? I'm happy to answer your question. Please answer this one. Would you suggest that a late-term abortion is brutal?
I'm not taking a view on this issue. I'm asking you the question.
I want to pause it here and bring in our friend Timba on Toast and his section from this Dave Rubin Dave Rubin's Battle of Ideas Part 3, explains exactly the little move that Ben Shapiro does called the Mott and Bailey.
This is really
Analyzing the things Stefan says is a fallacy called the Mott and Bailey. The phrase Mott and Bailey comes from medieval castles which had a particular structure. A gated courtyard area outside, the bailey, where the main settlements were, and then a heavily fortified stone keep high up on the hill, the motte, where everyone would retreat to when hostile forces approached. The bailey is vulnerable, open to attack, but the motte is safe, unassailable. The Mott and Bailey fallacy revolves around trying to defend a controversial position, a bailey, by defending a loosely connected common sense assertion which is impossible to argue against, a motte. An example of this would be if I said that women don't belong in the workplace, and then when asked to defend my position, I said, you can't deny that there are biological differences between men and women. You can see how the two concepts here...
So you see, that's exactly what he's doing, pivoting from this bill to the specific question of late-term abortion. Now, I don't know how he's defining late-term abortion, but we do know that quote-unquote late-term abortions in terms of, like the baby's about to be due are performed only in instances where the mother's life is at risk, period. And we also know that Donald Trump and others are running around the country just lying about killing babies after they're born. So I don't know what kind of spin Shapiro's trying to do on this, but he did a Mott Bailey, and he's also being disingenuous about what that actually means. And I also would like to say, in terms of the sacredness of life, we'll get to what Ben Shapiro said about Trayvon Martin after the rest of this clip.
You suggest that a late-term abortion is brutal.
I'm not taking a view on this issue. I'm asking you the questions.
Sir, you just suggested that the pro-life position is inherently brutal and terrible, so I'm asking you, as an objective journalist, would you ask the same question to a pro-choice advocate by calling their position brutal and horrible?
What I'm asking you is that why is it that a bill banning abortions after a woman has been pregnant for 6 weeks is not a return to the Dark Ages? What's your answer?
My answer is something called science. Human life exists at conception. It ought to be protected. Now, back to my question to you. You purport to be an objective journalist. BBC purports to be an objective down-the-middle network. It obviously is not. It never has been. And you, as a journalist, are proceeding to call one side of the political aisle ignorant, barbaric, and sending us back to the Dark Ages. Why don't you just say that you're on the left? Is this so hard for you? Why can't you just be honest? Seriously, it's a serious question.
Mr. Shapiro, if you only knew how ridiculous that statement is, you wouldn't have said it. So let's move on.
I also love because it's like Ben Shapiro has built this whole ludicrous, sad brand of this sort of faux, this ridiculous posture of sophistication. And he's having an exchange with basically what he's sort of indirectly molded this whole dumb persona off of. I mean, I'm sure, he's studied the Buckley tapes and everything, even though he has none of that kind of fluidity, but this is what it all comes back to. It comes back to sort of high Tory sort of disdain. And he's on the receiving end of it. And he doesn't even know who he's talking to. He thinks Andrew Neil is labor or something. I mean, this is genuinely mind-blowing that this guy has a brand as an intellectual. I just like to remind everybody. I mean, I guess, and I think this is true clearly for a lot of these people, that when they're done, and obviously this is really about controlling women's lives and autonomy and bodies, but even if we were to stipulate, and we never should, but I will for this specific instance, that there's a concern about babies. I don't know when that concern stops, but if you'll remember, several years ago, in 2013, there was an innocent teenager who was killed by George Zimmerman named Trayvon Martin. And Ben Shapiro said, in reality, Trayvon Martin was a fully grown man with a history of violence who got into a fight with a Hispanic man, George Zimmerman, under disputed circumstances, then was shot in the chest while beating Zimmerman's head into the pavement. So he took, of course, Zimmerman's and his lawyer's account at face value. We do know that Zimmerman, a very disturbed person, was following and stalking. I believe Trayvon was only 13 years old. And this child ended up murdered. And then, as Hassan Piker says, Ben, Hitler could have been rehabilitated, but Trayvon Martin had it coming, Shapiro. So after embarrassing himself by throwing that tantrum and asserting that he was talking to some type of anti-conservative journalist. The interview went on until, and we're cutting some of it. The whole 8 minutes is pretty funny and revealing. But,
the full thing is actually 16, so we're
16.
actually missing out quite a bit of this.
Okay.
But this is the last.
This is
6
the
minutes
last.
of the
This is when we finally have our. This is when the. How dare you, sir? And read one of Ben's thriller novels to really show, because he had to show what it was.
The sirs are really flying.
The sirs are flying.
As you say in your book, you say that there's quite a key phrase: "We are so angry at each other right now." But as I say, aren't you part of that anger? Aren't you encouraging that anger? For example, you described Mr. Obama's State of the Union address in 2012 as fascist mentality in action.
Well, I think that if you want to argue with the characterization, then we can talk about what exactly his State of the Union address said. Is it charged language in politics? Sure. The problem that I have is not with charged language in politics, which I'm generally in favor of. I like a robust public debate and a very loud and spirited public debate. I have no problem with that whatsoever. What I'm talking about is the assumption that people with whom we disagree politically are inherently of bad character, or in your words, want to bring us back to the dark ages.
But again, it was your description of the State of the Union address in 2012 as fascist.
The wording of President Trump's 2012 address was
He's so flustered.
bad and wrong.
That's all. There are plenty of things that are bad and wrong, but it doesn't make them fascist.
Well, I suppose that's true. But if you would like to read me the column out loud.
That was logic. Andrew Neil just gave him a little A+B there.
If you'd like to read me the column out loud, I suppose I can critique it for you.
Oh, well, again, with Mr. Obama, you said, and you're Jewish yourself. I only mention that because, to put this in context, the Jews who vote for Obama are, by and large, Jews in name only. Ginos, you call them.
My statement was based on the fact that Jews in the United States, as an ethnic group, are largely irreligious, which is true by every single poll. Jews are the most irreligious group in the United States. As an Orthodox Jew who actually takes Judaism seriously, the point that I am making is that most Jews who are ethnically Jewish are not religiously Jewish in any context.
No. The point you were making is that Jews who vote for Obama are Jews in name only.
I said that, yes, that is correct, that Jews who voted for Barack Obama, a progenitor of the Iran deal, a person who was cracking down on religious liberty, a person who spent much of his career as president of the United States attempting to deprive Israel of the necessities to defend itself.
Pause it. I'm sorry. I mean, there's just a few things in this torrent of lies and bullshit. Okay. Unprecedented funding for Iron Dome, as an example, right? Ehud Barak said that no other president had done more in terms of security cooperation than Barack Obama. And those of us who actually care about Palestinian civil rights and self-determination were appalled by the Obama administration's endless support of Israel, no matter what they did, including at 2 different times during the transition in 2009 and then in 2014. Such ferocious bombardments on Gaza that even in 2014, Joe Scarborough questioned, as an example, when Israel bombed a UN school. So, again, crackdowns on religious liberties and all this. I mean, he's talking about pharmacies needing to be able to give women the day after pill. Okay, so he's using this maudlin, melodramatic, disingenuous language. But at some point, we need to inject a little bit of reality. Also, the Iran deal, supported by sane people in Israel like Ehud Olmert and the intelligence and members or former members of the intelligence and military apparatus. Go ahead.
The necessities to defend itself. That people, Jews who voted for President Obama, by and large, cared about Judaism far less than they did about other priorities.
Did you said they should turn their badge in as a Jew?
Yes, I believe that if you are somebody who takes Judaism seriously, that comes along with ideological commitment.
I mean, I guess.
Also, I hope you're having fun, by the way, going through every old tweet that I've ever sent to try and do gotcha questions. But if you'd like to have a discussion about my general philosophy or things I've done in, say, I don't know, that's 2012, so it's now 2019. If you'd like to discuss something I've done in, say, like the past 5 years, why don't we do that?
What a whiny little
Because
cretin.
your book is a criticism of how angry America is and how America has to do better. And I'm simply
I have
trying
an
to
entire
point
list
out-
on my website, sir. Sir,
And
on my list, I have an entire website of dumb,
I'm
bad
simply
things
trying
that
to
I've
point
said.
out some of the things you've said that seem to me to help to stoke that anger. For example, you said Israelis like to build, Arabs like to bomb crap and live in open sewage.
Well, as I say in an article entitled, "Here's a list of all the giant, bad, dumb things I've ever said."
Was that
list includes,
dumb?
Well, yes, that's a dumb tweet. And not only, but it is also important to mention that the next few tweets clarify that that tweet is specifically referring to the Hamas leadership, which, by the way, a BBC I've seen is relatively reticent to condemn.
No, actually, it wasn't what you went on to do and say.
But it's just beautiful the way, because he took some dumb, and of course the BBC condemns actions by Hamas. The BBC is quite moderate. It just acknowledges international law and an example in Israel-Palestine. But I just love that Andrew Neil does not even feel the need to go chase that dumb little chestnut. Just like, okay,
well,
and
it's
back to actually what you were saying.
You can see the dishonesty in Shapiro in that tactic there, right?
Yes.
Because he talks about, he characterizes the subsequent tweets as if they basically make that tweet not dumb,
right?
And then moves on to make an assertion about the BBC that he thinks Neil is going to follow up instead of that, but Neil impressively stays on the trail.
That the next few tweets clarify that that tweet is specifically referring to the Hamas leadership, which, by the way, a BBC I've seen is relatively reticent to condemn.
No, actually, it wasn't what you went on to do and say. You are correct about the slur on Arabs. It's not all Arabs that want to live in open sewage and blow things up. It's just Palestinians. You went on to say.
It says the ones who take sides against Israel in the Israel-Palestinian
Arab
conflict.
population is rotten to the core. You went on to say, not Hamas. The Palestinian Arab population.
I say that by poll numbers, they elected Hamas. They educate their children's.
Wait, I thought you weren't saying that. So now we're going to justify saying that with the usual litany here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought we were talking. Why do you need poll numbers to talk about the Hamas leadership?
Wait, and I thought you were disaggregating from Hamas from the regular Palestinians. But now because they voted for Hamas, maybe they all are actually bad. Ergo, maybe the tweet isn't a problem. What are we saying here, Ben?
The Palestinian Arab population.
I say that by poll numbers, they elected Hamas. They educate their children in school that Israel should be obliterated, sir.
I guess.
If you want to read, honestly, this is a giant waste of time in the sense that the entire interview is designed for you to shout slogans or old things that I've said at me. I don't see how this forwards the debate. You talk about undermining the public discourse. It seems to me that simply going through and finding lone things that sound bad out of context and then hitting people with them is a way for you to make a quick buck on BBC off the fact that I'm popular and no one has ever heard of you.
There are not many bucks to be made on the BBC, unlike American broadcasting, Mr. Shapiro. The point I'm trying to make is that your words are hardly designed to produce the consensus and understanding that the book seems to want to produce. That's my point, that you write about, Judeo-Christian culture and so on, but so much of what you've said in the past would seem to turn its back on Judeo-Christian culture.
You're lecturing me on Judeo-Christian culture after you call the pro-life position barbaric?
I just asked you a question.
All he does is evade.
And I asked you a question. You failed to answer a single one of mine. Frankly, I find this whole thing a waste of time. If you want to read the book and critique the book, why don't you read and critique the book? If you want to critique me, you can think whatever you want of me.
Frankly,
I don't care. I don't frankly give a damn what you think of me since I've never heard of you.
And I've never heard of you until I briefed myself for this. But that's not the issue. You have a
then
new
why the hell
book
are you
out,
interviewing
and it's an interesting book. But my point is, your book claims that
it'd be nice if you would quote it from time to time.
Your book is, well, actually, I've done so several times, and I'm about to do so again, if you would let me just finish the question. Your book claims that society is turning its back on Judeo-Christian values.
Yeah,
what are those values? What are the values it's turning its back on?
I'm not inclined to continue an interview with a person as badly motivated as you as an interviewer. So I think we're done here. I appreciate your time, sir.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time and for showing that anger is not part of American political discourse. Now, Mr. Shapiro, we'll say goodbye.
Oh my God.
Ben doesn't like it when context isn't provided for certain tweets and things like that. Man.
Wow.
He's got to be
The
feeling that
era
feeling
of the
Mark.
pajama boy is over.
Word. And if he's your intellectual leader, you should be fucking embarrassed.
The cool kid's philosopher,
The
baby.
cool kid's philosopher, keeping it
Get out
cool.
those cool kids.
You know what's so funny is I'm not even like I'm sure it would be unpleasant, but it's like so tightly if I get to be interviewed by Andrew Neil for my book and he's like telling me like 2013 you said that Sam Harris, had less braids than Zoolander, but equally less charm than Neville Chamberlain. What do you say to that? I would be like, you
Yes.
just made that quote up, but that's awesome. I wish I said that. Could we extend this interview to grill me for another 10 minutes, sir?
Is this just a highlight reel?
Yeah, this is a...
That's the fun thing about being like when we're really nasty on Twitter, it's to like fascists.
Right. Exactly. It's the bad people. It's the bad people. That's beautiful. Watch all of it and tweet follow-up questions to Ben respectfully and cordially.
Ben's actually, hold on. Let me bring
Yeah.
up Ben Shapiro's Twitter feed because he's been tweeting about this.
Because he's pretty triggered.
Yeah. So basically, he said, he was underprepared for going onto the show.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I would say, yeah, just about in general, underprepared.
Oh, my God. I remember this other point he said that he walked out of Breitbart out of principle. And I mean, I guess, sure.
Oh, yeah.
That would not be my guess. Is that I think that more of my interpretation would be, yeah, well, whatever.
Here's what Ben said. AF Neil destroys Ben Shapiro. So that's what it feels like, winky face. Broke my own rule and wasn't properly prepared. I've addressed every single issue he raised before. See below. No, that's not true, as Neil points
Right,
out.
that's why he was talking to you.
Still,
it's Neil 1, Shapiro 0.
And then let's see what else. I think he said something else. Yeah. Yeah, I can't find the other one. But
Whatever. Ben Shapiro's a bad person. Respectfully follow up with him. You're calling from a 509 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Is the phone up? 509. Are you there? No, I'm not. It's getting no life. 509?
509.
509.
Nope.
All right, try back. You're calling from a 408 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? 408? Is this a problem on our end?
Hello, 408. The meter, the levels.
I mean,
are fine.
everything seems totally fine here. Hello, 408? Are you there? All right. All right. I'll try one more, and then if not, I'll call back into the system. You're calling from a 416 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm Brad, calling from Toronto.
Brad? Rod.
Yes.
Oh, Brad.
Calling from Toronto.
Brad, what's on your mind?
Well, Michael, I would just like to commend you for how you've kept with it regarding Lula's political imprisonment, his criminal political imprisonment.
Thank you.
And there's an analogous figure I think that you guys could give some more airtime to.
Who?
That would be Selahattin Demirtas in Turkey.
Definitely.
As well as the HDP co-chair Figen Yüksekdağ.
Yes.
And many, many other politicians of the same party.
I agree with
I know that-
Gene Bajlan and I actually wrote an article about him for Jacobin, and I will be doing more coverage. These are leaders of a Kurdish social democratic party that actually brilliantly connected the struggle for Kurdish protections and rights in Turkey with an agenda for austerity, pro-labor, the ecology, and a much broader expansion of rights across the board. And they performed well electorally, and they've been imprisoned with, purely, obscene, saying that they're pro-terrorist and this type of thing. They're definitely political prisoners, Demirtaş and his comrades. And Gene and I wrote the piece. I have talked about it a little bit, but yes, it's a very important story. We'll do more of it for sure. I agree with you.
Great, because I think something people don't understand maybe in the West is that neither the AKP and, of course, their evil MHP coalition, nor the CHP have any interest in ever letting him out of jail. I believe the spurious charges he's up for right now, he's in for 4 years or so. But he's charismatic, and, they would rather say, hey, we're negotiating with the old 1990s PKK led by Duran Kalkan and Jamil Bayek, and we have, they know that Demirtaş is the bridge. And just seeing him rot in that jail in Diyarbakir is, breaks my heart.
I appreciate that. Thanks for the call. I definitely will cover that more and look up the piece with Gene Bajlan and Jacobin. Thanks so much. That's a really important story. We'll do more of that. But actually, let's do this because of the call. Let's do this Lula story quickly, and then we'll get to some more sound. So 2 different things we're going to do here. We're going to play a clip. Lula, after being silenced for a year, the reset, as always, was that he's the former 2-term president. He led by double digits in the polls. He was put in jail without, based off the testimony of one informant. Sergio Moro, the prosecutor, now justice minister for the fascist Bolsonaro government, served both as prosecutor and judge, which is a rule that is a hangover from the Inquisition that still exists in Brazil. Judge Moro called Lula 9 was his nickname because he's missing a finger because he had a finger, he lost a finger as a young metal worker when he was coming up as a young man. The American Association of Jurists, and I'm quoting now, which is has an NGO consultative status at the United Nations Economic and Social Council, has published a statement recognizing Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as a political prisoner. Lula's sentence, and now I'm quoting again from the letter, was issued as a consequence of accusations produced by violating due process law that prejudiced his right to a defense without evidence, the AJJ said. Brazilian far-right politicians benefited in the elections while Lula da Silva was isolated in prison as a presidential candidate and had the broadest popularity in electoral polls. They denounced his sentence and they said such conditions demonstrate, including his lack of ability to speak to the press, demonstrate a detention that was made by violating fundamental guarantees, endorsing clear political motivations, and lacking connection with properly well-defined offense, and having duration and accessory penalties which were aimed at both moving Lula da Silva away from national political process and laying the foundations to discriminate against people endorsing different ideological tendencies through irregular procedures. He could be described as a prisoner of conscience. So this is fundamentally a byproduct of U.S. foreign policy starting in 2009 in Honduras, where there was a coup against the center-left leader Manuel Zelaya, supported by Obama and Clinton. And even though these pink-tide governments in Brazil and Honduras followed a center-left path, Chavez and others a more left path, the sort of tolerance for even the most sort of moderate redistribution and resisting of Western multinationals, and as an example, emergent oil markets in Brazil, was both intolerable to oligarchs at home and the traditional, Wall Street and petrochemical interests of the states and others. And that is the broader context behind these things, and behind, again, the imprisonment of an extraordinarily popular leader with no evidence. Lula finally was given the right to speak. He held his first press conference. This is actually in prison. I do find his resiliency incredible. And here he is a little bit. Unfortunately, I wish the people who've done this had not betted music under it. But this is the English translation. We're going to play some of his reflections on what's happening now in Brazil. Again, extraordinarily impressive that a year in solitary confinement. His family's been prosecuted. His country's under assault by Bolsonaro and Trump, and here he is. Wait, pause it. Are you speeding it up? Can you just go at regular speed so I can read so I can keep up with reading for people. Yeah. The day I leave here, they know I will be on the road. You can keep... For together with the people held up our heads high and not give our country to the Americans. To finish with the underdog complex. I've never seen a president saluting the American flag. Bolsonaro saluted the American flag. I've never seen a president saying, I love the USA. I love it. Love your mother. Love your country. We love the USA. Is there anyone thinking that the USA is going to favor Brazil? We are the ones who must fend for ourselves. End with the underdog complex, uphold our heads, and realize that the solution to Brazil is the problem in Brazil is Brazil itself. Look, the government lowers the people's income per capita. You, the government, decrease the minimum wage, all things Bolsonaro is doing. You, the government, reduce the possibility of job training, and you think that that's $1 trillion? For a pension funds and Social Security will solve anything for the financial system? It's going to be all right? Do you know what works? What works is doing what we did. Legalize and formalize 6 million individual entrepreneurs, small businesses. Do you know why pensions and Social Security had a surplus in my government? Because it had 20 million registered working people. Because it had 6 million individual entrepreneurs formalized. Because Brazil's quadrupled its expirations rate. So when you save money, the people can eat 1 extra bread, drink 1 extra coffee, have 1 extra beer, earn extra real, buy another sandal. That way you start to create jobs in the country. So basically, I mean, he did follow a Keynesian policy that, as I would say, lifted about 40 million people out of poverty and increased material well-being for tens of millions, including his most historically repressed. Right now, under the guidance of a Chicago school economist, they're trying to get rid of pensions, and they're attacking the legality of labor unions as well. So I don't know where the OK sign comes from. I noticed that people showed that Eddie Murphy made the sign in one of the Beverly Hills Cops movies.
Well, it's a common gesture. It used to mean okay.
I've seen it.
In a scuba context, it means like I'm not drowning.
Right.
In a I just hit a 3-pointer on a basketball court, it means I just hit a 3-pointer and that's cool.
Right.
In a right-wing context, it means I'm a white supremacist.
Precisely. And in Turning Points USA, which is a very interesting idea, recently had to apologize for something involving that symbol. Let's read at TPUSA's statement to the University of Nevada. I'm assuming that's what is it? University of Nevada, Las Vegas community. TPUSA's official statement. As soon as the video in question came to the attention of Turning Points USA, we swiftly and permanently removed the student from any of our current or future involvement with our organization.
What about due process?
His comments were abhorrent, un-American, and disqualifying. We'd also like to commend the decisive action taken by the UNLV chapter leadership that acted quickly to remove the student from their chapter membership and involvement. As any larger organization should, TPUSA has a zero-tolerance policy for hate, no matter the medium or dated or act the comment. We hold our tens of thousands of students to the higher standards. Wasn't this one the one with like also the leaked conversations of like
don't lead with the Jew stuff.
Don't lead with the Jew stuff. Here's also an image of okay, let's do this first. This is the video that they were apologizing for. This is a kid named Riley Greiser, who was in the TPS USA
chapter leader for UNLV.
He was the chapter leader for the UNLV. Apparently, he's also the son of a vice president, Michael Greiser, at Aegis Senior Communities. So I don't know who the girl is in the video. It's a little, I mean, they could have been, 17, 16, 15 when this came out, but he was a chapter leader of this group that gets a huge amount of money from people like Foster Friess that have helped, with the support of people like Jordan Peterson, are trying to eliminate any type of even basic historical conversation in college campuses. There's a reason why Jair Bolsonaro is gutting academia in Brazil. There's a reason why, as Cornel West said, in the Reagan era, the first thing to go is arts funding. I mean, there is a structural purpose behind the propaganda campaigns of these people. And this is the type of sickness and white supremacy and grotesqueness that it's facilitating.
And we have
definitely, like,
language
if you're language warning, and if you and kids, this is totally disgusting, but I'm sure it won't surprise anybody.
I
love these guys.
Dude, we're gonna rule the country. White power.
White
Fuck
power.
the niggers.
Yeah.
Fuck the
Fuck them
niggers.
all. Fuck them all. That's right.
It's about exploring ideas. Just have to explore ideas with TPUSA.
I want
exploring ideas.
To bring up here, where is this? Tim Pool picked a few days ago, was upset that the white power, that hand gesture that they said when they said white power,
right,
was blurred out at a Cubs game, and Tim Pool's like, well, it's just the okay game. It's just the circle game. The circle game is a game where if you make that gesture, make a circle underneath your belt, there's like, I think in my hometown, it was like you could get punched in the private parts after.
Oh, okay.
So it's the circle game, but I don't think they're playing the circle game right there.
I don't think so. This is Charlie Kirk. I don't think he's playing the circle game either, unless that little guy punched him in the nuts underneath the Trump sign after it. So there you go. I mean, look, I think that there are plenty of people who are not part of the Republican Party, who might not be up to date with every bit of language. They might even disagree on things that are really important. But I don't think that they're fundamentally driven by this. I think that particularly if you're a young person and you're going in, if you look at Donald Trump and you want to join that party today, I think we need to be real about what's motivating people. I'm not sure that every single member of the TPUSA college campus has those beliefs, but I would be shocked if it wasn't over 80% of them. Oh, and they're throwing the sign behind the black commentator. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really adds to forwarding Beanie Man's point over there.
And Tim Pool says, I can't see
That's
things
Beanie Man.
improving. Society is falling apart. We know it's the circle game. We know it was part of a hoax. They don't care. The hoax thing is just, it's garbage, like 4chan shit.
Why
like,
is it with this fucking
It doesn't
whining?
matter if white supremacists think they're being, or to what degree white supremacists think they're being ironic with that gesture. They're still white supremacists throwing that gesture. They know what it means.
Precisely. All right, let's get back to I guess a bit of positivity. We have two pieces of sound with Bernie. Bernie Sanders has announced an incredibly important piece of legislation with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to rein in predatory lending practices. This is at the same time where Donald Trump is pushing forward a plan to lift every single protection and restriction on agencies from harassing you, bill collectors from hounding you in your home 7 days a week. Bernie Sanders is working to do quite the opposite with AOC. Here he is with Ali Velshi and Stephanie Ruhle. Once again, correct policy, and Bernie Sanders, a very strong and clear political communicator and moral communicator here. Let's go.
Okay. All right, so what this would do, as you just articulated, is it would cut sharply into profits for lenders, the banks that make these loans and issue these credit cards. Do you have concern that because of that, the banking lobby is very, very strong and they influence a lot of your colleagues, as you have known for the last few decades?
Do I have concerns about that? Well, that's kind of an understatement. Look, you got Wall Street and the drug companies and the insurance companies basically running the United States Congress. That's why the rich are getting richer and so many people are struggling. But I think here, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, you have a profound moral issue. Every major religion, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, every religion understands that usury and loan sharking are immoral. And let's call this what it is. This is loan sharking. Now, I don't know that the well-paid executives on Wall Street go around breaking people's fingers or their kneecaps, but what they are doing, and think about this, half of the American people today have no wealth at all. They're living paycheck to paycheck. You got a medical emergency, your car breaks down. These are desperate people. And then they go to Wall Street and they're charged outrageous interest rates. Wall Street profits are soaring. People get further and further in debt while wages remain stagnant. This really is disgusting. And it has we have to stand up to the greed of Wall Street.
This is exactly right. And again, there is a real consistency here. Let's play the throwback clip just to complete this cycle. I mean, in the 1990s, through well into the Obama era, this guy was not taken seriously for talking about the reality of what has been happening since the late 70s, accelerating through the Reagan-Clinton eras, ripping apart regulation, primarily tax cuts to redistribute wealth to the top, people's lives getting harder and harder and harder, and predatory Wall Street and financial services companies filling a gap of absolute human desperation with usury rates in their credit cards, as an example. This is Bernie Sanders' victory speech in 1990, getting elected to the House. He was right then, he's right now.
As I understand it, Congressman Smith has just conceded. There's one point that I've been making throughout the campaign, and I want to make it again tonight. And that is, you all understand that it is not going to be Bernie Sanders or any other member of Congress that's going to bring about the change that we need. That what we need in this country is a mass movement of tens of millions of people who are prepared to stand up and say, we want national health care. We want the millionaires and the multinational corporations who have not been paying their fair share of taxes to start paying. That we want money going into education and environmental protection. And no more Star Wars or stealth bombers. Tonight, as I stand before you, I think that maybe one small state might go down in history as being the leading state in the fight for a political revolution. A political revolution which takes power away from the multinationals and the wealthy and gives it back to the people where it belongs.
Couple years ago, from that point, Joe Biden was on television demanding that George Herbert Walker Bush put more nonviolent drug offenders in prison. All right, let's take a final call. Sorry, we do have to leave pretty quickly, so we won't get to all calls, but we'll try for two more. You're calling from a 530 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, my name is Levi, and from Shasta County, California, District 1.
Hey, Levi, what's going on? What's on your mind?
Not a whole lot. A few weeks ago, possibly a month ago, this guy called in from my area code, and you did not get along with him. Let's say it that way.
Okay.
And
well, he probably was wrong.
He was wrong.
Okay,
but,
cool.
He's kind of my issue. I've done canvassing in this area, and he's kind of par for the course. You stated that he was either like a really good troll or very serious, and you just didn't get along with him,
Uh-huh.
I think that he was furious.
Okay. Okay. I mean, yeah. What's the question? Did we lose you? Hello? Hello? Levi. I mean, he still says he's on. I don't... Levi. Sorry, man. Try
I
back.
think you muted yourself, buddy.
I apologize. All right. Final call of the day. You're calling from a 509 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, this is Ronald Reagan.
The great Ronald Reagan, host of The Redirect. Subscribe.
Yeah, actually, I'm calling because I've been kidnapped by a violent drug cartel.
Oh, shit.
I'm in
God, you have
I'm
good
in their
cell
custody
service.
as we speak.
Okay.
Well, they allow us, because I'm not the only one, but they allow us to make these phone calls in order to solicit certain demands, and they're asking that people sign up on my Patreon page. The idea is that then I mail them a check, I think later.
Right.
Or I can PayPal it to them.
Smart.
That's smart. I've heard that the Sinaloa cartel has been moving into the Patreon market.
Right. I hate to do this, but I'm in a tight spot here.
Mm-hmm. Well, what can we do to help? We don't want any harm to befall you.
Right. Hey, I got a quick question for you, though.
Yes.
What's up with the Fiesta Pail?
Next Tuesday, we're doing it. It's on.
Okay.
It's on.
Can't wait.
I can.
Have fun, bro.
Much appreciated. Yep. No, next Tuesday. Unfortunately, last couple of Tuesdays, I wanted to interview Mike Hanna about the South African elections. I thought there might be a few things that were slightly more, valuable from a TMBS audience standpoint than the three of us retching. But this Tuesday, we're going to do it.
I think you're misreading your audience there, big guy.
Raul Reagan, thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
I've got an update.
Okay, update. Sorry, folks. No more calls. We'll take a few more IMs.
It appears that they're, and this isn't, I'm not happy about this, but it's a bit poetic.
What is it?
Barely 6 months after he credited Trump's tax cuts for creating a new economic boom, My Pillow boss Mike Lindell is laying off 150 employees.
Sometimes you got to crack a few eggs to keep the white nationalist train a-rolling on Fox News.
Right. Disgusting. But, yes, not at all surprising. Jesus. Jay Cool. Is it me or is everything Ben Shapiro says about democracy, human rights, logic, and the reason a lie, his voice appearance, total lack of charisma make me think his core brand proposition is creating mass shooters? Above all else, hey, insoles act like this. Colin from Nebraska. In Capitalism versus Socialism clip of Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger and Bill Gates and Buffett said, quote, many wonderful people do not possess market value related talents, end quote. So in other words, wealth. Fuck Warren Buffett. Also, Bill Gates said
Fuck Warren Buffett.
Right, fuck him. Also, Bill Gates said Bernie wanting to get rid of billionaires. Bill Gates said Bernie wanted to get rid of billionaires is going too far. Oh, well, fuck Bill Gates too.
Yeah, well, he is one.
Yeah. What is so? There's literally nothing surprising or impressive or interesting. I mean,
but it should be underlined.
They're the political enemy.
Yeah,
yes.
Warren Buffett is included among them, even though he says nice things every once in a while.
Right.
He's bad.
Precisely.
Should not have that much money.
Exactly. Period. No one should have that much money. It needs to be reclaimed so people can have health insurance. Since the IDW is about ideas, David, well, he's in Ezra Klein, who's lots of diverse opinions on his podcast. Consider remember, Wolverine. My claws have been stuck out since 2016. Congressional baseball fan. Meghan McCain stealing Jewish American Princess Valor has been a bad call by the coaching staff this season. Can we agree that she's not ready for prime time and needs to be sent back to the minors to work on her fundamentals, like inheriting a beer magnet fortune, planning to become a music journalist, and trying to set the record for number of times she can talk about her father in a single conversation? Play ball. Dan from Bethlehem. Not sure if you guys heard about Kim's demands of access to athletes as part of the denuclearization agreement. Imagine the gall of Kim when he says many athletes have passed a visit to Trump White House. Totally unfair. I have not heard about that. Contagious Chameleon. Economic anxiety vote for Trump only applies to white people economically. Poor people, people of color stayed home. Bhaskar mentioned it. They weren't inspired to vote. But the fact that some economically anxious people voted for Trump means they weren't aware of or weren't scared by Trump's racist message. It may be a gamble to assume economic leftism will override their social conservatism.
It's different types of economic insecurity there. The people that don't vote, they're just poor people. The economic insecurity among Trump voters is people who want to make sure that they can keep having a 3-stall garage and keep the Mexicans out of the country.
Absolutely. And again, I don't know how many more times I can say this. There are voters who, yes, they had the ability to overlook that, and I disagree with that. But there are voters that you can identify who are absolutely geographically hugely important where they're located, who absolutely have serious for real economic suffering, and they responded to that hustle, that scam. And in a way, again, the answer is economic leftism regardless. Economic leftism that also fights xenophobia and racism. So if we all know, and there's not a single person anywhere on the left on this divide, and if somebody said, that about Bhaskar, they're lying and smearing, who isn't fundamentally opposed and absolutely there for the fight against bigotry, we all know what the answer to this is. I mean, you need economic leftism, period. So even when economic leftism was not an electoral winner in the same way, Bernie Sanders was right in 1990. And no one thought that was the trajectory of victory. I mean, yes, Bill Clinton ran a somewhat economic populist campaign, but nothing compared to what Bernie was talking about. Bernie was right.
Well, there's also a difference between...
Marianne Wright Edelman was right about welfare reform. That was a hugely popular thing. She was right. It was a classist, racist attack.
And part of this is about cultivating a democratic republic, too.
Right.
You need to do these things so people have the ability to, democratically inform themselves.
Absolutely. Ryan in LA, I think White House Correspondents' Dinner MLK is a keeper. Yeah, I agree. I think with Ben Shapiro's Mott and Bailey approach would work with an American interviewer. Yes, I think that's also true. Ben Shapiro, how dare you use my words against me? Harumph. Let's see. And the final item of the day. The Heathen. Can I get a shout out for my girlfriend, Abby? It's her 28th birthday. She's feeling a bit down, and I'm sure this would make her day if she heard this. Thanks. Well, happy birthday to you. We'll keep going. We appreciate all of you. We're back Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah,